Good evening, and thank you for joining us. So I just wanted to start the legacy multilateral banks. They're about a few decades old. What, according to you, is what they're missing, and what would make them fit for purpose?
So all of the multilateral banks, starting with World Bank, started in 1944, have over the last 6-7 decades played a very important role in development. However, as you know, markets change, the depth of capital markets have changed. Financial innovation today has revolutionized the industry. There's a degree to which some of the institutions have become hierarchies and bureaucracies, and the processes have become ossified and slow and bureaucratic. So there's scope for a fair bit of reinvention of the original model. So one of the advantages of being new, of setting up an institution in 2015 as the new development bank is that you can look critically at the past. You can try and replicate the best practices from these institutions and identify what Mr. Kamath called next practices, what will define multilateral banks of the future. So we have the benefit of hindsight, but I should say that we have learned a great deal from these institutions because of the depth of technical, financial and other expertise that rest within the MDBs.
But the MDBs, what is it? I mean, our topic today is what would make them fit for business. So any comments on that?
I think there are a number of areas where there's potential scope for change. Firstly, I would say just at the level of governance, right? All the major MDBs have resident boards, which means that oversight of the institution happens within the board of directors, sits within the bank, in the case of the World Bank, in the case of the IMF, Asian Development Bank, and so on. So we have, for example, adopted a model of a non-resident board, which means the board is only responsible for strategic oversight, and you hold management to account at a strategic level. So that's the first one. Secondly, the existing MDBs have a control structure that still reflects, I would say, to a large degree, the balance of power that existed many years ago. So the large countries, developing countries like India, like China, and so on, Brazil, are still underrepresented in terms of their economic weight. These economies have grown over the last few decades, but their proportionate voice in these institutions is not in line with their economic voice. That's number two. Thirdly, I think there's huge scope to move the model away from only sovereign-based lending. So when the World Bank was formed in the post-war period, it was set up as part of an endeavor to do the reconstruction of Europe after the war. However, it made sense at that time to do loans mainly backed by sovereign guarantee. Today, the private capital markets have developed so much that it does not make sense anymore to solely focus your lending on the public sector. So it's much more important for banks now to crowd in private sector capital, because private sector capital now constitutes the bulk of the flows into infrastructure. Thirdly, how we price our loans, we need to look at what kind of technology systems we use. Today we have cloud-based systems, for example. We don't need big legacy IT systems to run these institutions. So there's a lot of practices that you can adopt in 2016, which maybe was not possible for these institutions to adopt in the 1960s, 1970s, and 1980s. And there's a couple of other areas as well which we are looking at. So we're doing a critical reassessment of the model to see, could we look at the toolkit and look at what's maybe missing, where could we add. And so we're moving from the assumption that there's still going to be significant more disruption in financial services. The entire industry is being dislocated by the advent of new technology, and we're hoping that we could ride that wave and adopt some of the benefits of new technology offer.
That's indeed quite great. You propose to be lending in sovereign currencies, and you have raised in the Chinese markets. What are plans for the other big countries?
So one of the distinctive areas of the business model of the New Development Bank is to not only raise and lend in hard currency. So all of the multilateral banks essentially lend in US dollars. They do also raise local currency, but it's not very common to also then on-lend to your clients in the governments or state-owned enterprises in their local currency. Our preferred model, where pricing makes sense, is to issue local currency. So we started with a bond in the Chinese market. We acquired a AAA credit rating in the Chinese market and issued our first bond there. From a pricing perspective, it made sense, but also the bank is focused on developing local capital markets in the respective BRICS countries. One of the advantages of the structure of NDB is that the countries that are lending, meaning 5 countries, are also the countries that are borrowing, which means that there's an alignment between the bank, if you like, and our clients. Whereas in the other multilateral banks, the developed nations have a much bigger say, and therefore the relationship is a little bit out of sync between the borrowers and the lenders. So to come back to your question, we started in the Chinese market. We are very keen to, and we've looked at the offshore rupee market, so we're keen to look at the masala bond as it's called, and there's a large base of institutional investors in Singapore, for example, and London, who understand the rupee market. We have a demand for rupees. So we are looking at India as potentially the next potential issue of NDB paper.
What kind of a working relationship do you envision with the other entities?
So in our articles, very importantly, our founding fathers have stated very clearly, despite what I've just outlined of the historic underrepresentation of large emerging markets, the reality is that we are closely intertwined with these other multilateral banks. Firstly, we have formal memorandum of understanding. We've got agreements with these institutions, with the World Bank, with the Asia Development Bank, and so on. These are partnership agreements where we collaborate with each other. We exchange knowledge. I mean, if you think about it, and I'm sure in your institute it's the same, you don't build all the capacity in-house in today's modern world. You access through networks the knowledge base of that exists out there. So there's a very important, we hope to build knowledge platforms amongst the NDBs so that we can not replicate unnecessarily within the institution, for example, a big research function. These days there's so much macroeconomic research, for example, that's been conducted by central banks, by think tanks, and so on. So we've got a working relationship with these MDBs to co-finance. In other words, we work on large projects together. We both, for example, put in debt or equity or provide guarantees for a particular project. We do knowledge sharing. We do secondments where we second staff to them and the other way around. So there's a whole package of measures how we're hoping to embed a very firm relationship with these institutions, because it's not about competition, it's about finding the right complementarity between the MDBs.
And I guess that's one of the ways that you'll keep your bank clean. I have read
exactly. Speed is one of the most important aspects of our business model. We want to see how can we improve the efficiency of the loan processing, the loan approval time, to reduce the time it takes for loans to be approved for a large infrastructure project. So how would you do that? You do that in multiple ways. One, in the lean and agile structure and get rid of the sort of silos that you traditionally have in most companies. The problem though is that as firms grow, silos are inevitable because you become bigger and bigger. However, today the real art and skill is to maintain that nimbleness and agility despite the fact that you are growing. So we are hoping that we can innovate around that model. We are fortunate to have someone like Mr. Kamath, for example, who built ICICI Bank from a small institution in 1996 to a bank with 40 million customers. He was also chairman of Infosys and therefore had a bigger technology set of lenses. So we have the sort of visionary leadership from Mr. Kamath to inspire this move in instilling this idea of a lean, agile, nimble, multilateral bank focused on what it means for private banking in the 21st century.
That's definitely really good news, because most of the problems with our infrastructure needs are, untimely delays, and if we can get away with that, that would be excellent. So energy is one area where you have issued loans, your first tranche of loans. What other areas can we see lending in?
So, energy is one of the critical ingredients of growth, and in many of our countries there's an urgent need to redesign our entire energy systems. In India, in China, in South Africa, for example, it's used coal-based energy system, which emits a lot of carbon and therefore is very damaging to the environment. So one of the first priorities, in fact, Prime Minister Modi emphasized this last year when the bank was launched in Ufa in Russia. He wanted, in the first phase, for us to have a disproportionate focus on renewable energy. And it so happens that each of the countries, each of the 5 countries, as part of their portfolios that they presented to us, had a strong component of renewable energy. So in the first phase of our operations, we concluded transactions just under $1 billion, $911 million to be precise, one project in each of the 5 countries. So energy we started with, but we're not going to only focus on energy. Transport is a very important sector as well. When I say transport, I cover the full spectrum of roads, toll roads, ports, high-speed rail, all of that infrastructure associated with urbanization. Because one of the most important aspects of development today is that cities is really the locus where unbalanced growth is most found. So dealing with cities and dealing with the sort of consequences of rapid urbanization is a major focus for us as an institution and for our member countries. I've just been driving here in Mumbai and know what the road infrastructure, for example, is like. And there's an urgent need to have long-term plans in place, which institutions like ourselves could fund and play a catalytic role in, crowding more private capital for those endeavors.
Most definitely, and I'm sure India will look forward to such funding in the future. And so with this, I think I'll bring it to a close. And thank you so much for coming. Thank you.
Thank you.